I don't know exactly when it started, when admiration turned into something else. But I do remember the first time I stayed late after practice and realized I didn't want to leave. It was my senior year. 18, just old enough to feel like I knew who I was, but not yet brave enough to say it out loud. I wasn't the star athlete or the loudest guy in the locker room. I was just there, solid enough on the track team to be useful, quiet enough to fade into the background. Coach said I was dependable. That meant something to me. Coach Thorne was different. He wasn't loud like other teachers. He didn't bark orders or try to be anyone's best friend. He just was confident in a way that didn't feel forced. Late 30s maybe. Tall. The kind of build that made you believe he'd played in college but never talked about it. He had this calm energy, like nothing rattled him. It made everyone lean in when he spoke. When he asked if I wanted to help him after school, track setup, locker room check, gear inventory, I said yes without hesitation. Not just because I liked feeling useful. It was also because of the way he said it. Like I mattered. Like he saw something in me that maybe even I hadn't seen yet. First, it was just routine. Roll up the hurdles, lock up the supply closet. Make sure no one left their cleats behind. I talk, he'd listen. Or sometimes we'd just work in silence. And even that felt easier than being anywhere else. But then I started noticing things. Like how he'd say my name. How he'd glance over his shoulder when I walked in. Then smile a little, like he'd been waiting. Or how he'd always hand me the water bottle first, even if there were a dozen other guys around. It wasn't obvious. Nothing that anyone else would notice. Just small things. And maybe they meant nothing. Maybe it was just me. But it didn't feel like nothing. I remember one afternoon, late in October. The field was empty, golden sunlight stretching long shadows across the grass. I was hauling hurdles back to the shed when Coach walked over, unwrapping athletic tape from his hand. "You okay?" he asked. Just like that. No build-up. I blinked. "Yeah." "Why?" He shrugged. "You've been quiet." I gave a small laugh. "I'm always quiet. Not like this." He looked at me then. Really looked. And something in me wanted to say everything. That I didn't feel like I fit anywhere. That I looked forward to these moments more than I should. That sometimes I replayed the way his hand brushed mine when we passed the Gatorade jug. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I said, "Just tired." He nodded once, like he accepted it, but his eyes stayed on me a moment too long. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, heart pounding for reasons I couldn't explain. I told myself I was imagining it, that he was just being kind, that nothing had happened. But a part of me, some stubborn, quiet part, wondered. I started paying closer attention. How he never called me kid like he did the others. How he asked about my college plans but also if I was happy. How he gave space but still noticed when I was distant. I wondered if I was imagining the weight in his gaze. If he could feel mine lingering too long. If maybe he knew. And if he did, what did that mean? I didn't have the answers then. I still don't. But I do know this. There were moments he looked at me like he saw right through me. I wondered what he saw. It became a routine, staying behind after practice. A few of the guys joked that I was Coach's pet, the way I always hung around after the drills wrapped up and the water jugs were half empty. But I didn't care. It gave me an excuse to be near him, and he never asked me to leave. We'd fix the hurdles that the guys had knocked over like wrecking balls, sweep dust out of corners of the gym no one cared about, or sit at the bench with a clipboard, reviewing race times and warm-up stats that, truthfully, only Coach really cared about. I'd sit beside him, sometimes pretending to be more focused than I was, because most of the time I wasn't watching the numbers. I was watching him, the way he leaned forward when he was thinking, how his forearm flexed just slightly when he tapped the clipboard, how he smelled like cedarwood deodorant and a trace of sweat, clean, human, real. But it wasn't just the physical things. It was how he changed when we were alone. Around the team, Coach Thorne was firm, cool-headed, efficient. But when it was just the two of us, he softened. He'd joke more, ask questions that went deeper than "How's school?" Like, "Do you feel like you belong here? Are your folks proud of you? What's something you've never said out loud?" I didn't always know how to answer. Sometimes I just laughed it off. But he didn't pressure me. He just nodded like he understood that silence could be a kind of answer too. One day, we were sweeping the gym, just the soft sound of bristles against polished floorboards and the echo of sneakers. I was focused on a stubborn corner when I felt it, his hand on my shoulder. It was casual, a light squeeze, nothing overt. But it lingered, a moment too long, just enough for me to freeze, to feel my heart skip like a scratched CD. "You've been doing good work lately," he said, his voice a notch quieter than usual. I turned to look at him, my breath caught halfway. He wasn't smiling, just watching me carefully, his hand still resting there, firm but not heavy. "Thanks," I managed, my voice cracking in a way I hoped he didn't notice. And then he let go. He turned and walked back toward the equipment closet like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just set my entire nervous system on fire. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling again. I replayed the moment over and over, the touch, the look, the sound of his voice when no one else was around. It didn't feel accidental, but it didn't feel reckless either. Felt intentional, measured, like he was testing something. And yet nothing happened. No words.
No explanations.
Just silence between us the next day, like the moment never existed. But I knew what I felt. The static in the air when we stood too close. The way his voice changed when he said my name. The almost smile he gave me when I reached for something he was already handing me. It was a dance we weren't naming. A current pulling underneath our everyday conversations. And the worst part? I didn't know if I was dreaming it up, or if he was dreaming it too. Either way, I couldn't stop coming back. Because somewhere deep down, I didn't just want to help Coach after school. I wanted him to notice. I wanted him to keep touching my shoulder. And maybe, just maybe, I wanted him to never stop. It had been a rough day. One of those days where everything hits you at once. My mom had been on edge again. Something about money or my future or maybe both. My stepdad barely looked up from the TV while she yelled. I left the house early just to escape it, even though I didn't have a first period class. I ended up sitting on the bleachers for almost an hour, just staring at the field like it might give me some kind of answer. Didn't. Practice was normal enough. Sprints, drills, shouting. My body moved, but my head was somewhere else. Coach watched me. I could feel it, not just in passing but really watching. His eyes lingered longer today. After most of the team cleared out, he caught me in the hallway. "Everything okay?" I froze. The words felt too big in my throat, but he didn't look away. "No," I said before I could stop myself. He waited. I took a breath, leaning back against the lockers. Home's just loud. Everyone talks, but no one listens. I feel like I'm standing in the middle of a storm and everyone's mad at me for getting wet. He tilted his head a little. "That's a hell of a metaphor." I shrugged, a bitter laugh slipping out. "It's not even that bad. Some days I feel like I don't belong anywhere." Coach was quiet for a long moment. "You belong here," he said finally, and I wasn't sure if he meant the track team or the school or with him. But it was the way he said it, low, certain, that made my chest ache. I followed him back to the gym. The sun was setting outside, casting long golden shadows across the floor. We moved around silently, gathering cones, folding towels, spraying down the benches. It was quiet work, but comfortable. Then, as we were both reaching for the same water jug, our hands touched. Not a brush, not an accident. A press, a pause. I looked up and so did he. He didn't move. He didn't let go. I felt the air shift between us, like the temperature dropped by 10 degrees and then spiked just as quickly. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. He was still holding my hand, just barely. His fingers brushed the side of mine in a way that wasn't casual, wasn't platonic, wasn't coach-like. He looked at me with something soft and unreadable, a question behind his eyes. Then he spoke, voice low, quiet enough to disappear into the gym's echo if I weren't standing so close. "You ever feel like you want something but can't say it?" His words hit like a second heartbeat. I couldn't answer at first. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. So I just nodded, small, slow, afraid the motion alone might unravel everything I'd tried so hard to hold together. He still didn't move. I thought, This is it. This is the moment where he either steps back and pretends it didn't happen but he didn't do either. He just let the silence grow between us, filling with something heavier than words, something charged and warm and terrifying. I could feel everything in that stillness. My pulse, his breath, the subtle tremble in my fingertips. Coach finally let go, but not because he had to, because he chose to. Slowly, like he was setting something down he'd been holding on to for a long time. He took a breath and glanced toward the locker room door. "We should finish up," he said. His voice was a bit hoarser than before. I nodded, even though my legs felt like static. I bent down to pick up the last of the towels, my mind racing. What had just happened? Was it real? Did it mean what I thought it meant? We didn't speak for the rest of cleanup. But the quiet wasn't awkward. It was full, like we'd said something louder than words ever could. As we packed the last supply bin and rolled it into the closet, Coach pulled out his keys and locked the gym door behind us. "Let's finish this quick," he said. His eyes flicked toward mine, then back down. It wasn't a command. Felt like a test. Like he was asking, "Are you still with me?" I was. That night I couldn't sleep. I replayed every second. His hand on mine, his voice in the empty gym, that look in his eyes that didn't ask for permission but waited for it anyway. It hadn't been a fantasy. Not this time. He didn't push. He didn't cross a line. But he let the door open just wide enough for me to step through. And I wanted to. God, I wanted to. Because this wasn't just about attraction anymore. It wasn't just about wanting his hand on mine. It was about knowing that he saw me, and maybe, just maybe, he wanted to be seen too. A week passed like it was holding its breath. Practice carried on as usual, warm-ups, laps, team drills. But every moment I spent near Coach felt charged. Not with awkwardness, but anticipation. Like something had been started, and we were both afraid of finishing it too fast. We didn't talk about what happened. Not directly, but every glance felt louder. Every brush of the hand, every second we stood just a little too close. It all added up to something I couldn't ignore. Then came the text. It was just after 6 on a Thursday. I was finishing dinner at home when my phone buzzed. "Coach Thorne, need help with equipment. After hours. You free?" I stared at the screen for a long second, thumb hovering over the reply. It wasn't unusual, he'd asked me for help before. But after last week, it felt different. Yeah. On my way. The gym was mostly dark when I got there. The main lights were off. Just a few overhead strips casting long shadows across the court. It felt quieter than usual. Still, like the building knew something was about to happen. I walked in, expecting to hear the clang of gear being moved or Coach's voice calling from the supply room. But the equipment hadn't been touched. And Coach was standing by the bleachers, arms crossed, watching me. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Hey," he replied. Then he walked over. The sound of his footsteps echoed across the gym floor, and I felt my breath catch. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't pretending this was about cones or hurdles. When he reached me, he looked at me for a long, quiet moment. Then, without a word, he stepped past me and gently pushed the door shut. I heard the soft click of the lock. My stomach flipped. He turned around slowly, his eyes not leaving mine. "You've been looking at me," he said, voice low, measured. "Like you want me to know something." I froze. My heart thudded so hard it echoed in my ears.
Ido, he whispered.
He waited, didn't move, just stood there, giving me the space I needed to say it. My throat felt tight, but the words had been waiting, building. "I like you," I said. "Not just as a coach. Not just as a guy I look up to. I've liked you for a long time." I tried to hide it. I wasn't even sure what it was at first. But I think you knew. I think part of you saw it before I did. He took one slow step forward, eyes locked on mine. I kept going, voice trembling, hands shaking. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to make things weird, or mess up what we have. But I couldn't keep pretending I didn't feel it every time we were alone. Silence stretched out between us. His face softened, no shock, no rejection. Just understanding. Then he raised one hand, slowly, deliberately, and touched my face. Not roughly, not urgently, just his fingertips brushing my cheek like he was asking, "Is this okay?" I leaned into it. His other hand rested lightly on my shoulder. His thumb moved gently across the fabric of my hoodie. "I've wanted to say something for a while," he said quietly, "but I needed to be sure you were ready." I breathed. "I am now." He nodded once. That was all. Then he pulled me gently into him. Not forcefully, not like a movie kiss. It was quieter than that. Calmer. He rested his forehead against mine, eyes closed. We stood there, not speaking, letting the air wrap around us. Just two people holding a truth that had been waiting too long to be said. His hand stayed on my back, drawing slow, absent circles. It wasn't about lust, not in that moment. It was about something else. Recognition. Safety. That feeling you get when someone finally sees all the parts you tried to keep hidden and doesn't turn away. I didn't know what would come next. If we'd talk tomorrow. If we'd laugh about this someday. If it would get complicated. But none of that mattered right now. Because right now I wasn't guessing anymore. I wasn't wondering what he saw when he looked at me. He saw me, and he wasn't letting go. Time felt strange in that moment. The gym around us, the echoing walls, the faint buzz of overhead lights, the scent of polished wood and sweat, faded into something distant, irrelevant. All I could focus on was the way his hand settled lightly against my back and the way his breath met mine in the space between us. I'd imagined this moment before. Dozens of times in blurry dreams and late-night fantasies I never admitted to anyone. But nothing in those versions had prepared me for the quiet weight of it. Not the stillness. Not the softness. Not the realness. Coach didn't say anything at first. His forehead still rested lightly against mine, and I felt the warmth of him, calm, grounded, steady. I wasn't used to being that close to someone who made me feel safe. My hands hung uselessly at my sides, unsure where to go. I could barely breathe, not from fear, but from how overwhelming it was to be wanted back. He pulled back slightly, just enough to look at me. His eyes were softer than I'd ever seen them. No clipboard in hand, no whistle around his neck. Just a man, standing in front of me, seeing me. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "I think so." He smiled gently, then lifted a hand and tucked my hair behind my ear with the care of someone handling glass. "Good," he whispered. There was no rush.
No fumbling, no sudden moves.
Just the two of us, swaying slightly like we were standing at the edge of something neither of us wanted to ruin. He reached for my hand, slowly, like an invitation. I let him take it. His thumb ran across the inside of my wrist, tracing lines I didn't even know were there. I felt a shiver travel up my spine, not because of what he did, but because of what it meant. He wasn't treating me like a student, not like a kid, not even like someone he had power over. He was touching me like I mattered. I looked at him, heart caught in my throat. "Why now?" I asked quietly. He held my gaze. "Because I've been waiting for you to be ready." The words hit deeper than I expected. So many people in my life had pushed me into roles, expectations, labels I didn't choose. But not him. He waited. He gave space. He listened when no one else had. And now he saw me. Not just the parts one let the world see, but the vulnerable pieces I barely understood myself. We sat on the edge of the bleachers, side by side, shoulders brushing. I leaned against him, slowly, unsure at first, but when he didn't move, I rested my head on his shoulder. He let out a breath, soft, like relief. We didn't talk for a while. We didn't need to. When his hand found mine again, it wasn't eager. It was kind. The kind of touch that asks, "Is this okay?" The kind that waits for the answer. I turned toward him, eyes searching his face. "Does this scare you?" "A little," he admitted, "but not enough to walk away." That settled something in me, because I was scared of what came next, of what people would say, of how I'd be seen. But right here with him I felt something stronger than fear. Peace. He cupped my cheek with one hand, and I closed my eyes. Not because I wanted more, but because I wanted to remember this. The quiet, the respect, The feeling of being chosen gently. No one rushed. No one crossed a line. He didn't lean in to kiss me. I didn't ask for more than he was offering. We just stayed there. In the soft hush of an empty gym, hearts speaking what words couldn't. Later, when I stood to leave, he walked me to the door. He didn't unlock it right away. Just stood there for a moment, looking at me like he was memorizing something important. If you ever feel unsure about any of this, he said, you tell me, okay? You set the pace. I nodded, and something about that promise, his willingness to move slow, to honor where I was, felt more intimate than anything else could have. I stepped outside, the night air cool against my skin. But I didn't feel cold. I felt known. Not for how fast I could run, or how helpful I was after practice, but for who I was when no one else was watching. And he, coach, had seen all of it, and stayed. The days that followed felt like walking through a dream, one where nothing changed, and yet everything had. Coach didn't bring it up. Not directly. There were no texts late at night, no sudden declarations, no repeat of that quiet moment on the gym floor. But the air between us, it was thicker now, charged in a way I couldn't explain. Practice still happened. The guys still joked, sprinted, shoved each other on the sidelines. I still helped after school, still stacked cones, wiped down benches and marked stat sheets. Everything looked normal. But when we were alone, even for a second, that silence we shared said more than any sentence could. There was a moment, maybe 3 days later, where I dropped a clipboard and bent down to grab it. Coach reached for it at the same time. Our hands met. It wasn't a long touch, not even like before, but his fingers didn't recoil. They paused, brushed, slid across mine just enough to leave a trail of warmth. Neither of us said anything. We didn't need to. I didn't know if I was supposed to act different. I didn't want to make it awkward, but I also couldn't pretend it hadn't happened. That moment in the dim gym where he looked at me like I wasn't just another student, like he'd seen something and chosen it. Chosen me. Still, the questions kept swirling. Was it a one-time moment? Did he regret it? Was he waiting for me to say something? I found myself second-guessing everything. How long I looked at him, how close I stood, even how I said his name. I wanted to ask what we were now, but some part of me was afraid to break the fragile understanding that had grown between us. It wasn't silence out of fear. It was silence made of patience. Like we both knew what was there and didn't want to force it into the wrong shape. Then one evening, just before sunset, everything shifted again. We had finished clearing the field, and the rest of the team had already left. Coach and I walked back toward the supply shed, the shadows stretching out long behind us. I was holding a pair of cones, trailing slightly behind him, when he suddenly slowed down. I caught up and our hands brushed, barely. But this time he reached back. Not a full grab, not a sudden pull, just his fingers touching mine, then gently sliding against them, like he was testing the weight of something he already knew. I looked at him, breath caught. He looked ahead, then down at the grass, then finally at me. "We can't rush this," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "But I'm not going anywhere." That was it. No poetry, no declarations. But those 6 words cracked something open in me. He wasn't treating this like a mistake or a slip. He wasn't trying to rewrite it or tuck it away. He was there, standing beside me, choosing this whatever it was in his slow, deliberate way. And for the first time in days, the buzzing in my chest quieted. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "I know," I whispered back. "Me neither." We stood there for a while, the cones forgotten, the sun dipping low behind the bleachers. No one else in sight. It hit me then, the truth that had been growing all along. This wasn't a one-time thing. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't fantasy. It wasn't just the product of late nights and locked gyms and adrenaline. It was real, slow, scary, beautiful, and it was ours. We didn't kiss. We didn't hug. We didn't even touch again that night. But something settled in the quiet. Something that said, "We see each other. We want this, and we're going to be careful with it." Sometimes the loudest truths are the ones we never speak. And in that silence, I felt everything I needed to hear. I used to think I stayed after practice to prove something. That if I worked hard enough, if I showed up more than everyone else, if I followed directions to the letter, maybe coach would see me. But looking back now, I realize I wasn't trying to earn approval. I was just searching for connection, for something real, something that made me feel like I mattered. It was never about a grade or a recommendation letter. It was never about being the best on the team or the most helpful after hours. It was about him, and the way he made me feel like I didn't have to try so hard to be seen. When I first joined the team as a sophomore, I was smaller, quieter. I kept my head down. I just transferred schools and I barely knew anyone. I remember clutching the strap of my backpack so tightly my fingers ached. The locker room felt like a minefield of loud voices and jokes I didn't understand. Coach Thorne had just taken over that year. He wasn't like the others. He didn't try to be our buddy, didn't yell to make a point. He simply was steady, present. He noticed when someone was having an off day and never made a show of it. He gave instructions like he trusted us to follow them. And when I stayed behind the first time to help clean up, he didn't question it. He just handed me a towel and kept working beside me in silence. Back then, I didn't have the words for what I felt. I only knew that being near him made me feel calmer, grounded, like I wasn't alone, even when I hadn't said a word. Years later, I know now that what I felt wasn't just admiration. It was safety, respect, and slowly, over time, love. Not the kind of love people warn you about, loud and impulsive and messy. This was something slower, quieter, built in the spaces between words, grown over late afternoons, side glances, and quiet, steady care. Love like that doesn't scream. It listens. It waits. It opens its hand and lets you step into it when you're ready. Now, I don't feel like that nervous kid anymore. I've grown, not just taller, not just stronger, but into someone who knows who he is. Someone who's learned that the right kind of love doesn't make you question your worth. It reflects it back to you. Coach and I didn't talk about labels. We didn't have to. What we had was real, and we both knew it. The season ended with a win. Our last home meet, the kind of night that hums with energy and good sweat. The field lights glowed like halos, and the stands had only just begun to empty. I found him on the bleachers, sitting alone with his clipboard balanced on his knees. I climbed up and sat beside him without saying a word. We watched the field in silence, the way we always had. Like the quiet was its own language. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, streaking the sky with gold and dusty violet. The track was still and shining faintly under the lights. I could hear someone dragging a water cooler back inside, the soft rumble of wheels echoing in the distance. And then his hand brushed against mine. I didn't look over. I just turned my hand upward. He laced his fingers between mine, slow and sure. His grip wasn't tight, it didn't need to be. He was there. So was I. We sat like that, our hands resting between us. Warmth shared in the open without apology. No one saw. Or maybe someone did, but for the first time I didn't care. I wasn't hiding anymore. I thought I came to that gym to be useful, to work hard, to impress him. But I know now it was never about that. It was about being seen, and chosen, and loved. Not loudly, not recklessly, but patiently. Honestly, that night in the gym when he shut the door, it wasn't to keep something secret. It was to let something start. Something I'd never expected to find, and now couldn't imagine being without. He shut the door that night, but he opened something far greater. If you've ever felt seen by someone when you needed it most, or waited quietly for the right kind of love, share your thoughts in the comments below. Like if this story stayed with you. Subscribe for more slow burn, emotional gay love stories that speak to the heart. Your support helps us tell the stories we all needed growing up.